Imagine surviving not one, not two, but three of the deadliest ship disasters in history. She was there when the Titanic went down. She watched the Britannic explode beneath her feet. And she even escaped the Olympic after it smashed into another ship. Most called it a curse, others a miracle. But to Violet Jessop, it was just another day at sea. This is the unbelievable true story of the woman fate refused to drown, the nurse who defied death 3 times and lived to tell the tale. Her name was Violet Jessop. And what she saw on those ships would haunt her forever. Violet Constance Jessop was born in 1887 in Argentina to Irish immigrant parents. Her childhood was anything but easy. Disease nearly claimed her life at a young age, and poverty shadowed her family's every step. When her father died of an infection, her mother, a ship stewardess, moved Violet and her siblings to England in search of a better life. It was there, at just 21, that Violet followed in her mother's footsteps and joined the world of ocean liners. But this wasn't the glamorous life people imagined. The job meant endless hours, harsh supervisors, and passengers who barely noticed her. Days blurred into nights at sea, and Violet often went months without seeing her family. But duty came first. She joined the Royal Mail Line, and later the White Star Line, the company behind the most luxurious and ambitious ships ever built. Their newest creation was a floating palace called the Olympic, and Violet had no idea it would mark the start of a deadly trilogy of disasters that would follow her for the rest of her life.
If you're fascinated by unbelievable true stories like Roy Sullivan's, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Hit the bell so you never miss another tale of courage, survival, and the extraordinary.
The Olympic was a marvel. Gleaming decks, grand staircases, and the proud emblem of the White Star Line shining on her bow. To the passengers, she was a dream. To Violet, she was just another assignment, another ship, another voyage. But on September 20th, 1911, that dream turned into chaos. As the Olympic sailed past the coast of England, a Royal Navy warship, HMS Hawke, suddenly veered too close. The two giants collided with terrifying force. The sound, a deep metallic scream, tore through the ship. Cabin walls split. Passengers were thrown from their chairs. Violet steadied herself, rushing to calm the frightened and the injured. By some miracle, the Olympic didn't sink. She limped back to port with a torn hull and a shaken crew, but no lives lost. Still, something inside Violet changed that day. She had felt the ocean's anger up close. She knew now that even the greatest ships could bleed. But she didn't quit. A few months later, the White Star Line assigned her to a new vessel. A ship so grand it made the Olympic look modest. Its name was Titanic. After the Olympic disaster, Violet tried to convince herself it was just bad luck. A freak accident, nothing more. But deep down, something gnawed at her. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that metallic scream, felt the deck shudder beneath her feet. Still, the sea was all she knew. It paid the bills, fed her family, and gave her a purpose. And for women like Violet, quitting wasn't an option. So when the White Star Line announced a new ship, the Titanic, the largest and safest ocean liner ever built, she signed up without hesitation. At least, that's what she told herself. On the morning she boarded, a strange chill lingered in the air. The crew whispered with pride about her size, her luxury, her unsinkable design. But as Violet walked the gleaming decks, she couldn't shake the feeling that the sea had not yet finished testing her. She straightened her uniform, took a deep breath, and forced a smile. After all, she had a job to do. What she didn't know was that this voyage would change her life forever. The Titanic was unlike anything Violet had ever seen. Her corridors gleamed with polished brass and rich mahogany. The dining halls were filled with laughter, perfume, and the quiet music of privilege. Every night, first-class passengers dined under glittering chandeliers, while Violet and the other stewardesses moved like shadows through the ship, making sure every smile stayed perfect, every napkin folded just so. She served tea to wealthy families who spoke of new beginnings in America, and comforted seasick travelers in cramped third-class cabins who only dreamed of a better life. To them, she wasn't Violet. She was simply Miss Jessop, a face behind a polite smile. But beneath that calm exterior, Violet noticed everything. The rhythm of the engines, the hum of the decks, the eerie stillness of the ocean at night. Sometimes, as she leaned against the rail during her short breaks, she'd stare into the black water and think how fragile it all felt. The ship was magnificent, yet too perfect, too proud. And Violet had learned one thing from the Olympic. The sea doesn't care about human pride.
If you are still there, please hit the subscribe button.
April 14th, 1912. It was a calm, bitterly cold night. The sea was smooth as glass, unnaturally still. Violet was just finishing her shift when she felt a faint, muffled shudder. Nothing dramatic, just a strange vibration beneath the floor. A sound like metal sighing under pressure. Then, silence. For a few minutes, everything seemed normal. The band kept playing. Passengers laughed, unaware that the ship's fate had already been sealed. But down below, the truth spread like cold fire. The Titanic had struck an iceberg. Crewmen began whispering orders. Officers moved briskly, faces pale. Violet was told to help passengers into life jackets. Just a precaution, they said. But as the ship began to tilt ever so slightly, she knew this was no drill. The fear in the air was real. The same metallic groan from the Olympic echoed through her memory, only louder. The bow was already dipping into the black water, and the air filled with the sharp, chaotic mix of cries, orders, and prayers. Steam hissed from the funnels. The ship that once symbolized human triumph now trembled like a wounded beast. Violet moved fast, helping women and children into lifeboats, her hands shaking from the cold, but her voice steady. She didn't think, she acted. Years at sea had taught her that panic kills faster than the ocean. When her turn finally came, she hesitated. Part of her still couldn't believe this was real, that the unsinkable ship was collapsing beneath her feet. But an officer shouted, "Get in, Miss Jessop! We need you to show them it's safe!" And so, she climbed into Lifeboat 16, surrounded by terrified passengers. The ropes groaned as they were lowered into the freezing abyss below. The moment the boat hit the water, Violet looked up and saw the Titanic's stern rising into the sky. Hundreds of lights still glowed from the portholes, flickering like candles against the void. Then, one by one, they vanished. A deep roar filled the night as the ship broke apart. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt, deep in the chest, like the end of the world itself. Around her, people wept, screamed, prayed. Violet could only stare, numb, clutching a crying baby someone had placed in her arms. She didn't know the child's name, only that she had to keep it alive. Hours passed in the freezing dark. The cries grew fainter. The sea was littered with debris, faces, and silence. When dawn finally broke, the Carpathia appeared, a black silhouette cutting through the mist. Violet watched as the survivors were pulled aboard one by one. She felt no triumph, only disbelief. She had survived the Olympics crash, and now the Titanic. But deep down, she knew fate wasn't done with her yet. The war changed everything. Luxury liners were no longer carrying the rich. They were carrying the wounded.
Before we end, did you know the Titanic had a chief baker who survived the disaster? Because he was completely drunk. His name was Charles Jockin, and while thousands perished in the freezing Atlantic, he somehow stayed afloat for hours in the icy water, untouched by hypothermia. If you want to know how alcohol saved him that night, watch my previous video, Charles Jockin, the drunk baker who survived the Titanic. The link's in the description.
By 1916, Violet Jessop, older, quieter, but unbroken, was serving as a nurse on His Majesty's hospital ship Britannic, the Titanic's sister ship. It was the largest vessel afloat, refitted for war, painted white with bold red crosses across its hull, a promise that it was meant to save lives, not take them. But the Aegean Sea didn't care about promises. It was early morning on November 21st, 1916. The air was calm, the sun just rising over the Greek islands. Violet and the other nurses were preparing breakfast for the wounded soldiers below deck, when a deafening explosion ripped through the ship. The floor buckled, metal screamed, water began flooding in almost instantly. The Britannic had struck a German mine. Violet was thrown to the ground, ears ringing, her body trembling. She'd felt this kind of chaos before, but this was worse. She sprinted toward the lifeboat stations, helping the injured along the way, shouting over the roar of collapsing bulkheads. The ship was sinking fast, too fast. The captain tried to steer toward shore, but it was hopeless. The massive hull was already listing violently. Violet found herself near the stern, clutching the railing as lifeboats were launched. Too soon. She screamed at the others to wait, but it was too late. The propellers, still spinning beneath the surface, were creating a deadly suction. As Violet's lifeboat hit the water, she saw the horrifying sight. Other boats being dragged straight into the propellers, torn apart like paper. Men were thrown into the churning sea, their screams drowned by the roar of the engines. The next second, Violet felt her boat lurch violently. Without thinking, she jumped, diving into the water as the suction pulled everything around her downward. The impact was brutal. Something struck her head, hard, and everything went black for a moment. When she surfaced, the sea was full of debris, oil, and bodies. The Britannic, the pride of the White Star Line, was vanishing beneath the waves in less than an hour. Half-conscious, blood dripping down her face, Violet kicked toward a floating piece of wreckage and clung to it until rescue arrived. She would later write, "I felt myself going down with the ship, and then I was free." A fractured skull, dozens dead. But she lived. Again. 3 ships, 3 disasters, and 1 woman fate simply refused to claim. After the Britannic, Violet Jessop never spoke much about her pain. She recovered quietly, her fractured skull slowly healing, and, unbelievably, she returned to sea. Not out of obsession, but because that life, harsh and unpredictable as it was all she knew. Years later, when people asked her why,
life has
she'd
a way
simply
of
smile
surprising
and
us,
say,
even in the quietest.
who else would take care of the passengers? Behind that calm answer was something deeper. A strange kind of acceptance. She'd seen death 3 times and lived. She'd watched friends vanish beneath the waves, heard the sound of metal breaking and lives ending. And somehow, she kept going. To many, Violet became a symbol, the unsinkable woman. To her, she was just a survivor who did her job. She served at sea for decades, crossing oceans again and again, even as the world changed, from steam to steel, from war to peace. But in her diary, found years later, one line stood out.
I survived because it was not my time. But sometimes, I wondered why I was spared. When she finally retired to the English countryside, the sea was never far from her thoughts. She tended her garden, read her Bible, and lived quietly, the roar of the Atlantic forever echoing in the back of her mind. Violet Jessop passed away in 1971 at the age of 83. Peacefully, on land. No storms, no sirens, no sinking ships. Just silence. And the memory of a life that defied every law of chance. She was the woman who survived the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. The woman the sea itself could not drown. In the end, Violet Jessop's story isn't just about surviving shipwrecks. It's about what it means to keep showing up, even after the ocean has tried to take everything from you. Most people would have given up after one disaster. She faced 3. She didn't see herself as a hero. She didn't seek fame or pity. She simply went back to work, again and again, because that's what strength really looks like. Not drama, not glory, but quiet resilience. Moral of the story: sometimes life doesn't reward the brave. It just tests them. And Violet Jessop proved that courage isn't found in avoiding storms. It's found in walking back onto the deck, even when you know how cold the water feels.
Thank you for watching. If this video didn't waste your valuable time or added any value to your life, even just a little, please consider subscribing to Hello Stories. Until next time, goodbye, warriors.